I did. He said they's gonna be traveling for 2 weeks, but they would let us have a meeting and they'll be glad to talk to us about it.
I just can't believe it's March. You ready? All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Thursday, March 9th meeting of the Asheboro City Council. I would invite that you stand and join me in a moment of silent meditation, and we will follow that with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll start right in with the number 4 on the agenda. This is the appointed time for a public comment period. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to address the council tonight on any matters of city business or concern, this is your opportunity, and I will invite you to step to the podium and introduce yourself. And if you do speak, we have a sign-up sheet, and we'd like for you to print your name on the sheet, and that is simply for the translation or transcribing the audio tape so that we know how to spell it. We can't always get that off the tape. So, is there anyone in the audience that would like to address council tonight? Everybody wants to get home and watch a ball game.
That's right, all right. There should be more tournaments.
Okay. Council, you have in front of you items on the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that you would like to remove for individual discussion or consideration? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Mayor, I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Have a motion by Mr. Burks to approve the consent agenda. May I have a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Heath. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Consent agenda is approved. Mr. Nuttall, item 6. Item 6A is case number RZ 23-01, an application to rezone property located at 853 East Salisbury Street from OA6 to OA6CZ zoning to allow development of multifamily dwellings with a floor area ratio of up to 22%.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a legislative hearing to consider a conditional zoning district application. Prior to beginning the staff report, I do want to report that proper notice for this hearing has been provided by the city. The property has been properly posted, alerting the public to this requested zoning action, and letters were mailed by first-class mail to all property owners adjoining the property requested for rezoning. This is an application filed by Community Housing Partners for property identified as 853 East Salisbury Street. It includes 4 separate county parcel identification numbers of about 5.5 acres. This application is to take the property from an existing high-density office and apartment zoning district to a conditional office and apartment zoning district consistent with the plan, the site plan that I have distributed. Formerly, there had been a single-family dwelling on this property. The site is now undeveloped. On this overview map, the area outlined in blue is the subject property requested for rezoning. If you zoom in a little closer, you can see the blue areas denote some sort of office or office and apartment zoning designation. That's including that letter B on the south side, which is actually an office and institutional zoning district. The yellow, the darker yellow areas to the west are an existing medium-density residential zoning district. As you move to the brighter yellow on the south side of East Salisbury Street, that's a lower density, medium-density residential zoning district. The red on the screen identifies existing commercially zoned properties within this area of the city. As you look further east on Coleridge Road, you'll see an area of orange zoning. That is another high-density residential zoning district that is in this vicinity. This is a topographic and utilities map of the area. You can see the existing utilities that the city has in the vicinity. We have both water and sewer service in this area. You can also get an idea of the terrain of this property. There is some slope on various parts of the property that will have to be contended with for any development or proposal, and that plan before you attempts to do that. This is an aerial map showing the area and the existing development patterns. You'll see on the site plan, and as depicted on this map as well, there is an area of high voltage transmission electric lines along the northern portion of the property. As you can tell from the site plan that I'll put up on the screen soon, the development of this property is mostly contained on the southern half of the property. So as you move north towards those transmission lines, that is an area identified on the site plan as to be preserved, really clustering the development on this property closer to the Salisbury Street side of the property. This is an oblique map, so it's not from overhead, it's at more of an angle, again, giving you actually a more up-to-date depiction of the development pattern in the area. Again, you can see the Coleridge Road apartments to the right side there. The existing station, Duke Energy station there that receives those transmission lines. And you also notice the split. This property is right in the vicinity of the split of NC 42 and East Salisbury Street at that location. I'm going to try to describe this plan for the audience. The council has the site plan associated with this application in front of you. But this request does include 47 apartment units contained within 2 separate 3-story buildings. The necessary parking associated with that development is between the building and, or one of the buildings in East Salisbury Street. The second building is oriented perpendicular to Salisbury Street. You can see I have building 1 and building 2 depicting those locations. There's a single driveway that provides access to this site. It's pushed to the western margin of the property to maximize the distance between the East Salisbury Street and NC 42 intersection. The plan also calls for stormwater quantity control measures, so there is some sort of structural stormwater control device that is proposed for this property, which will collect stormwater generated from this property and hold it for a certain time period to not inundate the area with stormwater in the event of a storm. There is a pretty sizable recreation area that you'll see on the plan. I believe it's roughly 6,400 square feet. Includes some active recreation elements as well. In terms of landscaping on this property, along the frontage of East Salisbury Street, the project is proposing 1 shrub and 1 tree, 1 shrub per every 10 linear feet and 1 tree per every 20 linear feet of frontage along East Salisbury Street. Along the eastern and western property boundaries, there is a combination of plantings and fencing that will provide screening against the adjacent developed residential properties. And then as you move north, you start to see more of an area of preserved vegetation and less of a need to install new landscaping to provide that element of screening. And again, on the site plan, it is noted that the separation between the development and those transmission lines is 250 feet. And that's not as measured from the apartment buildings. That's actually measured from the extent of the improvements on the site. So the playground area to those transmission lines is noted at 250 feet of separation. These are illustrations of the building design. It's, again, a three-story pitched roof structure, primarily clad in vinyl siding. There is some masonry towards the first floor of the building. Turning to photos of the area, this is a view of the property as seen from East Salisbury Street. This is looking the other direction on East Salisbury Street. Again, eastern view along East Salisbury Street, subject property just to the left there. Now looking back towards town, west on East Salisbury Street. This is a view of the property from Spring Street. You can see those transmission lines in the view. So 200 feet or more from this area would be the start of the development more southerly on the property towards Salisbury. As we look at the analysis on this application, it is a property that's within the city limits currently. The city offers full array of services to this property. And looking at the city's transportation plan, which was last updated in 2014, East Salisbury Street and Highway 42 are noted as over capacity. The 2021 traffic volumes do indicate an average annual daily vehicles of roughly 14,500. 14,500. The carrying capacity of that roadway is about 12,000 vehicles per day. That's one of the reasons the State Department of Transportation has scheduled a widening from the East Salisbury 42 split to Highway 64 that will result in the addition of a center turn lane. It will help with capacity issues on that roadway. So there will be center turn lanes, sidewalks, curbing and guttering as a part of that NCDOT project from 64 to this location. Your report says that the schedule of those improvements was this year. We've looked again today. That has been pushed out slightly to 2025. One thing I'll say is as you look at the plan, the site plan in front of you, what this project would do would be to essentially continue the curb and guttering that would be installed as a part of that project and include the sidewalk as well. So this project would essentially carry forward many of the improvements that the DOT project is proposing. Already said the plan shows 2 3-story buildings clad primarily in vinyl. There is some masonry as well. There's 23 units in one of the buildings, 24 units in the second building. These are actually 1 and 2 bedroom units. Somebody had asked me before the meeting whether there were any 3 bedroom units. The plan does indicate 1 and 2 bedroom units. The recreational area is proposed as a part of the project. As you know, this is a conditional zoning application that does allow an applicant or request to deviate from certain elements of the city's typical zoning ordinance. This is a case where the project almost entirely complies or exceeds the city's development standards. The one area that they are somewhat deficient is typically on a project like this, we would require an area of screened storage, an area for recreational vehicles. They have not elected to do that. However, we have talked with them about a condition that would restrict under both the city's zoning laws and their management, the storage of those any type of recreational vehicles within the parking area. In addition, there are 17 more parking spaces proposed than the city would otherwise require. So we feel like there is some additional capacity provided, and there now is a condition proposed to limit any recreational vehicle storage. This is noted as a project requesting a floor area ratio of up to 22%. It's not, the development plan in front of you does not actually get to 22% of floor area ratio, but that's how the ordinance defines a project that looks to exceed what the city typically allows in terms of development intensity. Generally, in an apartment zoning district, you are permitted to develop up to 17% floor area ratio without coming to the city council for review and approval. If you request to exceed that, the next threshold is up to a 22% floor area ratio. That's why this application is before you, is to pick up that additional, to authorize that additional intensity, additional units, essentially. This is, again, an existing OA6 zoning district. It already allows single, two-family, multifamily, office and institutional uses, and some limited commercial uses. The district is described as intended to produce moderate intensity office and residential development adjacent to residential areas and to provide a transition from residential to commercial uses. If you think back to the zoning overview map, you've had a pretty clear demarcation between single-family residential or medium-density residential and then some more commercial activity to the east. That transition is provided by this office and apartment zoning designation. In looking at the city's land development plan, that plan already advocates for urban residential or high-density residential development for this property. So this application is consistent with that designation. The orange area on the city's proposed land use map, so this is right out of the land development plan. You can see the star identifies the area. It is colored in orange, just as the Coleridge Road apartments to the east. That is a urban residential zoning designation. The blue areas are intended to continue to provide some transition of office type uses along the East Salisbury Street corridor over time. We look to the LDP for guidance. It's an urban residential, primary urban residential designation within that plan. It is within a primary growth area for the city. As we look to the plan for goals and policy compliance, we believe that there are 6 goals or policies that tend to support this application. There are 2 tended to be negative towards the application. One pertains to some development, potential development of some steeper slopes on the property. The other is related to some existing infrastructure limitations, namely the roadway capacity out there that is to be addressed by the NCDOT. With this application, the staff has worked with the applicant on proposed conditions that we believe are necessary to ensure consistency with the land development plan as well as continued compliance with the city zoning ordinance. Before you are a series of proposed conditions. They're contained within the staff report. I won't read them verbatim. They have been shared with the applicant. But again, these are intended to ensure that over time, this property continues to comply with the city's development requirements and also carry out the goals and policies of our adopted land use plans. Condition G on the screen is the one that we added following the planning board meeting with where the recreational vehicle storage question came up. We believe the applicant's agreeable to that new condition, which is shown in G. Many of these are related to ensuring that as we go to the construction phase of this project, should the request be approved, that all the fire department requirements for hydrant and fire protection needs are met, that state permits for erosion control and Department of Transportation approval for access are obtained prior to development. These are pretty standard conditions that we suggest on most projects. With that said, as we look to a consistency statement, we do believe that this application that seeks a moderate increase to permissible floor area ratio for the project and therefore seeks additional authorization for the size of a residential project to be built on the property is in keeping with the city's land development plan. We believe it's an appropriate proposal for the urban residential designation. The primary evaluation is whether there's enough elements in this project to warrant an increase from that 17% to 22%. From the staff's view, we do believe that this project, by meeting and in many cases exceeding what the city would require for a multifamily development, does things that the city's adopted plans say need to be done. There's ample recreational and open space provided. There's additional landscaping and buffering along much of the property beyond what the city would typically require. There's provisions for stormwater controls for this property, which are not always a requirement for development. So in many ways, we believe this is exceeding what the city's expectation is. And therefore, the staff's recommendation is to approve this application. It also comes to you with the favorable recommendation from the planning board who reviewed this application at its meeting last month. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I know the applicant is here, and there may be some folks in attendance that would like to ask questions as well. Yes, sir.
It appears, I'm looking at the roadway section and the light lines that the proposed development comes to. Is this the proposed 42 improvements that I'm looking at for that roadway?
I think I'll let the engineer on this project answer that. This has gone to the Department of Transportation for comment. We did not hear any objections or requests to accommodate additional right-of-way as a part of that project. So I would rather the designer answer that question in their discussions with NCDOT.
The purpose of, let him answer that because I've got a subsequent question.
Yeah, we got the DOT maps and it does account for the.
So that is it looked like it was the proposed roadway improvement, and the reason I was asking that is I want to be certain that either, that the sidewalk, if that's not the case, but it sounds like it is, be delayed until the roadway comes. There's no point in somebody putting in a brand new sidewalk in 2 years, it'd be tore out for no good whatsoever. So the staking and location of the sidewalk, will it be possible to install that sidewalk as shown on this drawing prior to the roadway project? Because some of them go out an additional road, an existing road.
It would be pretty tough, I believe.
So how much sidewalk are you addressing for them to do versus
What the state
what I'm looking on
project,
this draw? Because obviously
Yeah.
there's a sidewalk on this drawing that's not in front of their property.
right. I think this property is about at the termination of the state project.
I do.
Yep. And so the expectation, based on this plan, is that this project, either at the time of construction or under some other fashion, install and have this sidewalk installed or guarantee that installation.
I don't know if it's necessary for us to put that in a condition with a permit or anything, but if there were some, I want to be sure, I'd like to see it for all parties concerned, especially the developer, that it get put in at the appropriate place, at the appropriate time, and not waste time and money, but to have the sidewalk.
Sure.
Naturally, but to put it in place, in the proper place.
Yeah, with the changing of the DOT schedule to 2025 now, I think initially these projects were maybe lining up a little better to not have that concern. That's, I think, a reasonable concern to ensure that the sidewalk, if this project gets ahead of the DOT project.
I mean, they're out there serving now.
Right.
Surveying now, and what'll happen, I promise you, is we're looking at a two-dimensional drawing, and the alignment's gonna come back in there, and that center line probably won't be off much, but that road's gonna be a foot higher than it is right now when they put that super in, and your sidewalk could end up. Will you take care of that?
We'll take care of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think that's, depending on how fast this project moves, if the district gets approved, the next step is gonna be submission of those detailed engineering drawings. That'll be another opportunity to have that conversation with the state to make sure we understand the timing and accommodate those issues, so.
When the ball games are over and they come back to the next public comment period, why do you make them put that sidewalk 2 foot below road?
Yes, sir.
Sure, I did have a question.
Sure.
With respect to the floor area, ratio,
Yep.
floor area ratio, is that the footprint of the building or is that the total square footage of the building?
That's essentially conditioned livable space within the building. So if there are, open balconies, for instance, are not included. If there are open breezeways, those are not included. But if there are enclosed hallways, livable square footage, that is what constitutes.
All 3 floors.
Yeah, all 3 floors, in general, right, all 3 floors, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, would the applicant like to address council?
Good evening, members of the council, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I am Tom Wright, and I am here to represent Community Housing Partners in this particular application. Mr. Nuttall, as usual, has covered most of the salient points regarding development, but I want to talk to you about a couple of things. One is the designation of this particular project as an affordable housing project. What does that mean? Well, it does not mean that you get a 20-story high-rise in the middle of downtown Chicago with a bunch of gang writing all over it and broken out windows and stuff like that. The affordable housing that we are talking about really is probably better referred to as workforce housing workforce housing. If you can qualify for this particular type of project, which is funded, I mean, and what makes this go are the tax credits, and it has to get tax credits in order to go. But anybody that is up to 60% of the median income of the area will be eligible to rent in this particular these particular buildings. Now, what that means is that the target tenant for these kinds of areas are people like beginning teachers, school teachers, law enforcement people, policemen, firefighters, that kind of thing. Anyone who can meet that requirement of income being at or below 60% of the median income for the area. Affordable housing is not subsidized housing. It is not the kind of thing that we all hear horror stories about that kind of stuff, but that is not what this is. What you see on these renderings, the drawings, is what you get. It's the kind of apartment that your children, you may live in or may have lived in at some point in your life. It's not something which is sort of a dead end for welfare moms and that kind of thing. It's really is a median or below income of people that will be attracted as tenants to this particular kind of unit. Community Housing Partners is not unknown. It may be unknown in this particular area, but Community Housing Partners has been in business since 1975 in developing these kinds of communities. The headquarters of the company is right outside of Richmond, Virginia, and since 1975, they have developed properties such as this in the Southeast over 6 different states, including North Carolina. There have been some projects in North Carolina. They have developed, I believe it's somewhere around 6,800 affordable housing units or workforce housing type units over that period of time. And really, in many ways, the city of Asheboro is lucky that they have designated this area to try to put this kind of project. Because, we all hear the news reports about how expensive the housing has become everywhere, not just in San Diego, but everywhere. And with all the stuff that's happening here to the east with the mega site and with employment that is coming this area, it's hard for somebody to find an apartment, much less a house in this particular area. There's a huge need for housing which can be afforded by people that just have regular jobs, not the people that are in the upper income, although they may have trouble too. But affordable housing throughout the country is kind of a holy grail in many municipalities. We all want to get it, but how to get it is very difficult. Community Housing Partners is different from many of the developers of this thing. They do not come in build the project, sell it, and then they move on with a fond farewell in their convertible as they leave town. Community Housing Partners actually owns the project, and they operate it. They provide the services for the project. And in fact, they even provide services to the residents. There's a community room in one of the buildings that can be used for many things, such as a leasing office, but also, you know, birthday parties and stuff like that. But Community Housing Partners has things like classes for financial, to help people manage the finances, to help people, if they want to, try to get out of the apartment and own their own home if that's what they want to do. They offer these services free of charge. And I think in the last year, they spent over $2 million over their system in providing these kinds of services to their residents free of charge. They intend to stay with the project. They don't intend to be leaving it, and that's something that is might be a little bit unusual in this particular kind of project, that somebody who actually does take ownership over what's going on in what they're building. So it's not subsidized housing. The target tenant is someone who works that has an income of up to 60% of the median income for this particular area. I don't know what that is, but you all might, but I do not. But in any event, let me say a couple of words about this particular project. You see from the site plan and from the other things that we've got, I think the application says 48 housing units. We actually have 47 because of the community room in one of the buildings. They're about an equal number of 1-bedroom units and 2-bedroom units. There are no 3-bedroom units in this particular proposal. In addition to the community room that can be used for many different purposes, you can see on the site plan that there are recreational areas for, you know, there's a picnic area. There's a, I don't know if it's a pickleball court or something like that, some kind of sports type thing. There's, in addition, there was some mention made about water and drainage facilities. There is a retention pond on the back of the property to slow down the water runoff in this, because it is, looking at the topographical map, it could be described as something of a rough site. However, the engineering has taken that into consideration, and that's just one of the site challenges that that Summey Engineering has had to deal with in coming up with this proposed site plan. In changing this zoning from OA6 to OA6CZ, this becomes site plan specific. In other words, we are actually looking at this particular site plan as what is actually going to be there on the site. As it stands right now, without anything else coming on, this site has already been designated by this council as OA6, which would permit multifamily housing. So the only thing that is different here is that we're not going to be dealing with RVs. Usually in this particular income range, you don't deal with RVs, but we're not going to have RVs on the site. And second, the housing density is increased, according to the site plan that you have, from 17%, which would be permitted now, is going up to 20%. That's the number that actually would be with the calculation actually here, not the 22%, but as Mr. Nuttall said, the category is 17 to 22%. We're actually at 20% of an increase. So with that, then, you can see that with the amenities and with the additional parking on the site and with the buffering that's there, with the stormwater facilities, with the additional sidewalks, with the all of the things that have gone into making this a viable community site, that the increase, the slight increase from 17 to 20% under these circumstances is well justified. The back of the site, of course, is going to be largely wooded, largely to screen off the Duke Power Station that's over there. There's not going to be any access, even though theoretically, I guess, I think that there's a corner that might go on Spring Road, but I don't see how you get access from that anyway, from that corner. But in any event, there's not going to be an access from there on to this site. It's all going to come off of East Salisbury Street. Now, when we were before the planning board, we thought that the work that was to be done on East Salisbury Street would be commenced in 2023, but as so often happens with the Department of Transportation, that schedule has actually moved back now, I understand, to 2025. I think it's important for the council to understand what the timing of this particular project is. If you approve this site, then the applicant can go and request the tax credits from the North Carolina Housing Authority. That's not the right name, but something like that. And then after that, it's going to take probably a year or two in order for the project to get going and actually start construction, just because of the tax credits and other things. So that it would be better, of course, if DOT started in 2023, but the fact that they actually postponed their work to 2025 actually works in and dovetails pretty well with the actual construction schedule that we're talking about, which might have some effect on sidewalks and things like that. So I'm not going to repeat the list of reasons that this, because we already know that it's consistent with what the existing zoning is. We know that that the only reason that council is being asked to rule on this particular request is the RV space, which is something easily taken care of by just saying there aren't going to be any, and two, the housing density, which is well mitigated by the other factors such as the sidewalks, the buffering, the additional parking spaces, all of that, which makes it a reasonable project for this particular site. So I'm going to stop, because there is a ball game. I'm going to stop and allow the council to ask questions of Mr. Summey, the engineer, and we have a representative from Community Housing Partners, Joe Schwenker, who is here that can answer further questions if the council has them about how the tax credit program works or that sort of thing, should there be any questions about it. Or you can ask me, I might be able to answer it, but if I don't know, I'm going to defer to them.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else that wants to address the council on behalf of the applicant?
Oh, I had some questions. Is not time for that yet?
No, ma'am, sorry. Council, do you have any questions?
I don't know if you want us to speak to the developer or you, but the proposed conditions as proposed by staff, are they amenable to?
I'm sorry, I meant to say that, yes, the proposed conditions are amenable to the applicant, including the ban on RVs.
Will these units be sprinkled?
Yes. The building code
Required.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay,
Thank you for hearing us then.
ma'am, it is your turn.
Thank you.
Come right on up here.
Oh, I have to come up
You
here?
have to.
Oh, okay.
And you need to introduce yourself
My
and
name is,
print your name on the list, please.
oh, the pen?
The one coming.
Thank you. Okay, my name is Teresa Jones, and I think I'm about 2 or 3 spaces to that property. I have a couple of concerns that were raised by this planner. In my mind, I had already asked him some questions. First of all, there's a lot of traffic on Salisbury Street, period, traffic. And now there's a lot of foot traffic on Salisbury Street. So one question I had is about this sidewalk. Where's this sidewalk going to start and end? And number 2, where 42 meets Salisbury Street, this is gobbledygook to me. How, it doesn't seem like it's that much space in there for all these houses, so I want somebody to explain that
All right,
to me.
Mr. Nuttall, you want to address the sidewalk? And we're talking about 2 specific projects, on Salisbury and 42. There's a DOT project that is,
Look at this while he talks, this is the new roadway, and that's where the sidewalks go, the sidewalks go all the way to 64.
When you say
Correct.
new roadway, where's the new roadway? On
It-
42?
Yeah,
Yes.
let me,
in 42, they're redoing 42,
At that light?
from the
Yeah.
light to,
Right.
to the highway.
that's what it looks like
64.
now.
Oh, out Salisbury.
That's what it looks like now. There's the subject property. And that's where it looks, you know, the angle, the crazy angle, right there. There'll be a main road. This will be a curve in the road, and this will be an intersection, and that's that intersection right there. And it'll come in right about where that number says 42. There'll
Where
be,
the light is?
yeah, well, no, the light will go away.
So that light's not gonna be there anymore.
Well, there'll be a light, it will not be in that current location.
Okay.
The light will be probably, right over here with this intersection. So the main road coming from town will just go straight on that.
Salisbury
42.
coming from the mall will be a stop
Yeah,
at the light.
Okay.
The 42 that you know now and Salisbury that you know now will be one street.
Oh, okay.
At the light,
Turn in, go straight on out past the YMCA.
So, do you think, that the traffic is gonna increase? That, and if it is,
It's
where's
busy
the-
now, how would you tell?
Where's the,
All right, well-
where's the sidewalk gonna be?
Right there. These lines right here are the sidewalk that
A
come right around.
sidewalk gonna come back there to
Yeah,
my
it-
house?
And I don't know where your house is.
My house is 2 doors up,
on
West.
Salisbury,
west.
She's about 2 houses west of there.
okay.
Is that
Single
you?
story
That's one house.
with the garage, Yeah. yeah, okay.
Somewhere right along in here is you. What's your address?
807.
I
And then
think-
the next house is 9 something, and then the next space is that land where you're gonna put the
I
apartment.
think we're talking about 2 DOT projects.
Correct.
The,
Yeah.
what you know as 42 now down toward the Y will be widened, turn lanes, there'll be a stoplight at Dublin, there will be sidewalks on both sides. All right. The second project
Yes.
is the Salisbury, and we've been pushing for that for years, to get Salisbury with sidewalks from Elm Street.
Oh, okay.
Right away is the,
And is
right away's been the,
Right of way.
the acquisition's been the problem
Oh,
here.
yeah.
Going all up in the woods? Won't
Well,
be-
as you heard, Mr. Nuttall say, it's already over capacity. The DOT projects that are scheduled, one shortly, the 42 project, is designed to alleviate some of that congestion and to increase capacity. Now, whether it will increase capacity enough remains to be seen.
It'll enhance the flow instead of having that bottleneck right there at that light.
Yeah, because that's
Yeah.
the
They
problem.
back up all the way back down the hill.
So as I said, coming from the mall, when you get to that light, that will be a stop. And 42 that you know now and Salisbury that you know will be one street.
Oh, okay.
Just to illustrate for everybody looking, on, the plan actually shows this new configuration of East Salisbury Street 42. It's in the lower right margin of the map there. That shows the proposed new alignment where East Salisbury Street and 42 will be teed, and the light will move to that location. And so that will improve the situation there. The other project, this project obviously is funded and is moving into the design and construction phase relatively soon under DOT standards. The project from Elm Street to this location, where the city has been advocating for that project. That one I don't think is yet designated, but we will continue to advocate for that property, and there may be a way for the city to accelerate that project as well.
All the foot traffic in Asheboro, that is probably our worst foot traffic area, right there from the mall, well, around the mall, but from Food Lion, the YMCA, back to Elm Street. There's more foot traffic there than just about anywhere in town.
Yeah, it's a lot. I was wondering if this project is gonna add to or take away.
Well, and the developer is required to build that sidewalk on his property in front of his project. Am I right?
Correct. That's a part of this plan.
He's doing his part for his parcel.
And that, just to elaborate, that's why you see sidewalks.
Gonna improve my project that I'm already living in, trying to figure out.
No, I don't think the sidewalk will not, as
It's
a
gonna
part
be
of
in
the
front
current
of his
project.
project.
Right. It'll stop before it gets to
The
your
highway
property.
project and the sidewalk will stop right about his property line, some in that plus or minus just right there at that general area. The next project phase that they're discussing would be in front of your house.
You had a second question. What was your second question? And did we just answer it?
I don't know, but I'm just,
There'll be no work in front of your house probably for
They-
several years.
It was related to the traffic and congestion and the sidewalks. Those were the two.
I don't know.
Is anyone else in the audience who would like to address council regarding this request? None? Council, you have any questions
I'd make
of the developer or the engineer
I don't make a commentary if it is, it's not about this development in particular, but I think it was, the latter part of the end of 2022, we get the League of Municipality magazine. And I don't know if y'all read the particular article, about the labor shortage in Wilmington, and said that was their greatest, impediment to economic development. Of course, they're heavily tourism like that. And the number one impediment to their labor shortage was lack of housing within an hour's drive to get the necessary labor pool, job pool in there. If we don't have, we'll run into the same thing if we don't plan ahead and have something of this description. They have a crisis down there. Of course, they have a different type of.
We do actually have experience in Asheboro with affordable housing. We have possibly half a dozen affordable housing projects here in town that are pretty much designed for the underpaid.
Or starting out.
Or just entry level.
Or entry level, and we've been pleased with the ones that we do have. While we don't have particular firsthand experience with this particular company, we have had good experiences with other builders of affordable housing. This project right beside City Hall is affordable housing for seniors that is about to open the mill. And then the one down the street, the Loft Apartments, was affordable housing that used tax credits to be built. And so it is very one piece of the housing puzzle. And while some people tend to misinterpret affordable housing, Mr. Wright there spent a good amount of time educating us on the difference. So just a commentary about what the request actually entails. So, council, are there any other questions?
I'd like to say that this project reminds me of the three-story apartments on Sunset. And they have done nothing but improve the area, in my opinion. So I think that really this project would end up improving your area, the looks of your area there, really. Did you- Sunset,
Down
three-story.
beside Dr. Butler's office?
Yeah,
Just-
and
just right down.
they've really improved that whole area. And I think this would kind of help that area too. Yeah.
And Mayor, I just want to comment, I appreciate the developer being willing to maintain some of the tree canopy. I think that's important.
Okay, if there is no more discussion or no more questions, I'll ask council for their thoughts on this.
Mayor, based on the consistency statement provided by staff, I move that we approve that it is consistent with our development plan, given the nature of the scope of it and the additional landscaping that is being implemented, and approve the conditional rezoning request subject to the conditions as proposed by staff and amenable to the applicant.
Everybody hear that? Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Swears. Discussion. All in favor of approving the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Before we get into 6B, let me back up just for a moment, please. Tonight, just before we came over here, we were invited down to the fire department for a presentation by the North Carolina Insurance Commissioner, a recognition and presentation. And it turns out that, and you'll be reading about it in the paper next week, but it turns out that our Asheboro Fire and Rescue Department has reached a level 1 ISO rating, which is less than 1% of all fire departments in the country ever attain and maintain an ISO 1 rating. 1 to 10 is the rating scale. Most reputable and well-performing fire departments are 3s, occasionally 2s, less than 1%, and that's a significant recognition that we have passed the certification requirements and the inspection requirements to be rated as ISO 1, the highest rating possible at Asheboro Fire Department. So that's big news, and just wanted to let you guys know and to make, for the record, a notice of achievement to our Asheboro Fire and Rescue. And just last year, they were certified as rescue. So they are Asheboro, used to be AFD, Asheboro Fire Department. They are Asheboro Fire and Rescue now. And they have worked really hard to be certified rescue capable, and now they worked incredibly hard to obtain an ISO 1 rating. So that's significant. And I passed a note down. I want everybody to read it and pass it back. Nobody down here has read it yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that.
Sorry.
So, all right.
The one rating, Mayor, will inure to the benefit of the citizens and the businesses because it can reduce their fire insurance premiums. So it's certainly to all of our benefits.
Okay.
And a number that Insurance Commissioner Causey, who visited us today, of 1,215 fire departments in the state of North Carolina, there are only 22 that have this ISO 1 rating, and we're one of them. That's impressive.
I don't think man on the street has a clue what kind of work, hard work and dedication and training goes into obtaining that certification. All right, Mr. Nuttall, moving on with item 6B is case number RZ 23-02, an application to rezone property located at 133 Southway Road. This is a hearing, I will open the hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a legislative hearing to consider a conditional zoning district application as well. Prior to my presentation, I do want to report that the proper notice for this hearing has been provided by the city. The property has been publicly posted, alerting the public to the requested action, and letters were mailed by first-class mail to all property owners adjoining the property requested for rezoning. However, following us providing notice, we were alerted by an adjacent property owner, the Lexington Commons Homeowners Association, that the address on record with the tax department for the association may not be the one used by the homeowners. However, under state law, we are directed to use the existing records in determining mailing addresses for adjacent owners, and that is what was done in this case. We also learned on February 28th that despite our posting of the property on February 21st, the sign was not present on the property as of February 28th. We reposted the property on that date, and as of March 6th and March 9th, the sign has remained up. So in our view, the proper notice and posting has been made for this property in this application. This is a request by FBP Investments, care of Ronnie Pugh, for property located at 133 Southway Road. This is a request to move the property, which is currently in a conditional zoning, R7.5 and R15 district, exclusively to a conditional zoning office and institutional zoning district that would permit business services from the property, as well as related and accessory enclosed storage. There's one Randolph County parcel identification number. It's just under 3/10 of an acre in size. Currently, there is a single-family dwelling on the property. The parcel outlined in blue in the center of the map is the small portion of property requested to be put into the office and institutional district. As we go in closer, you can see the letters on this map identify adjacent property owners who received notice by the city. You can see this is, from a zoning standpoint, primarily zoned residential, a medium-density residential zoning district. However, across the street from this property is McCrary Ballpark that has been there since the 1940s. That activity is consistent with an office and institutional type of zoning designation as well. So while the property for the ballpark is zoned residential, it's more consistent with a non-residential zoning district and activity. In terms of topography, it's a relatively flat site. There is a berm that is part of the Lexington Commons property that is to the rear, and that includes a row of evergreen trees that provides buffering from the Lexington Commons development against this property and the adjacent McCrary Ballpark use. We do have utilities within the vicinities. The site's in the city limits and fully served by all city services. And again, the development pattern shows you the proximity of this property to Lexington Commons townhome community to the south and west, and then the ballpark and the residential neighborhood further north. This is a more recent oblique map showing the development pattern in the area. You can see the existing vegetation that's part of Lexington Commons that provides a significant amount of buffering for that community against adjacent land uses, including this property. I've handed out the site plan that's proposed along with the application to put the property into a conditional zoning district. I'll hit the highlights on this plan. This is a 3,400 square foot building that's proposed with approximately 1,000 square feet of general office space that would be contained within the front portion of the building. There's 2,400 square feet of garage or storage area to the rear of the structure. In terms of setbacks, while only a 10-foot setback typically is required for this district, the plans show more than 20 feet of setback from the proposed building to the property to the south, which is a Lexington Commons common boundary. In terms of landscaping, the front yard, the area along Southway Road is proposed to be planted with 2 rows of evergreen shrubs, which would be on 5-foot centers at that street. So that plan depicts that. That is in excess of what the city would typically require for non-residential landscaping of this type. In terms of other landscaping and screening, the emphasis by the applicant on this is to really focus on that eastern property boundary, where to the east of this property there is an existing single-family residential use. You can see that there will be landscaping installed in front of the proposed building to Southway Road. That's 6-foot evergreen trees every 30 feet. Along the eastern property line, as well as evergreen shrubs every 5 feet. The ordinance does allow a wall, a structure to provide the equivalent of a screening fence or wall, provided there's no openings in that wall. One of the things the applicant has indicated on this plan is they will either not have any doors or windows in that eastern-facing facade, which would serve as the equivalent of planting evergreen shrubs down that property line. Or if there are windows that end up being proposed on that side, that would trigger the requirement to add evergreen shrubs, 5-foot centers down that eastern property line. In either case, the ordinance requires, the applicant has proposed evergreen trees on 30-foot centers along that property boundary. And that's noted and reflected on the plan. After this application went to the planning board, that board recommended that the applicant consider a condition that would ensure that buffering between Lexington Commons and this property be continued if in the event that existing evergreen vegetation that's currently planted on the Lexington Commons side were to die out or otherwise be removed. As you can see on this plan, along the western and the southern property lines, there is not additional landscaping proposed with this project. The idea is to allow what's a pretty sufficient amount of landscaping to serve or be equivalent to a typical buffer. The planning board's comment was that in the event that that disappears, the applicant would then be expected to come in and plant what would normally be required between a residential and an office type of use.
Who owns the buffer now?
I believe it's very hard to say. It's some of it's onto this. I would say has grown onto the subject parcel, but it is hard to say.
Looking at the border, you know, from the map, and it almost strikes me like the buffer probably was part of the requirement for the townhouse complex. I just wonder.
No, I do. Yeah, I do believe
it was theirs. So if it dies, it'd be theirs put back.
There may be a condition, right? Yeah. If in fact there was a condition on Lexington Commons to install that buffer, I don't know that that's the case. It very well could be. You're correct. If it were to die out under that scenario with where Lexington Commons was.
I was sitting here on that other board, but I scratched my head.
I think it was more about protecting from the ballpark. And you see, that's why it stops right down there to the left of the ballpark.
Who owned it?
I think Lexington Commons.
Because it's clearly, it was intentionally placed and planted, and I think that
Right.
was, whether it was voluntary or not,
Correct.
you know, but
And so that stipulation would apply if something's removed during construction or if something dies off because of the construction.
Yeah, the intention of that discussion with the planning board, it's articulated in note number 10 on the site plan, and it's referenced in the report. The idea would be if that significant vegetation is no longer present in the future, that the applicant on this request take action to install what would typically be required, but is not being proposed because of that existing vegetation. So I don't think it's necessarily one tree, if one tree were to potentially die, or a couple of trees need to be removed. But if in the future there is no vegetation, essentially, that would be equivalent to what we would normally require. That is at the point that that condition would be triggered.
And the 10-foot setback is sufficient width to provide the type of
Yes.
buffering?
Yes, sir. Yep.
And to be fair, we're only talking 80 feet. I mean, but still.
The other things I'll just note for the record, there is no outside storage proposed. That was a conversation we had with the applicant. All storage that is planned for this property would be within the, enclosed within the structure. There is no pole-mounted lighting that's proposed. We had conversations about whether there would be any light impacts from a non-residential use here. There may be building lighting that they are planning to install. That would have to comply with city lighting standards. There are no pole lighting that's proposed to be associated with the project. We would anticipate garbage disposal to be via city cans rather than a dumpster. There's no dumpster shown on this plan. There's not much of a location to get one installed, so the trash disposal would be by individual cans. This is the existing dwelling on the property. You can see that vegetation in the background that we had just discussed that appears to be on the Lexington Commons side. But I think some of that has grown across the
It's planted on
property.
top of the berm, when they built the berm.
Sure.
Is that a fence line back there?
There is, yes, there is also fencing along there. This is a different vantage point of the subject property. This is now looking east along Southway Road. Directly to the east of the subject property is a single-family home. 2 properties east is a 2-family dwelling. This is looking back west on Southway. This was work occurring back in January at McCrary. This is a view of that existing buffer on Lexington Commons adjacent to the subject parcel. So we looked at the analysis on this application. Again, properties inside the city limits, a full array of city services are offered. Southway Road, which does become North McCrary Street northeast of this area, is state maintained. It is designated as a collector level road with 20 foot of pavement width at this location. We have routed this development proposal to the DOT. They will be responsible for driveway permitting on the property. As I said, we've got a mix of single and 2-family dwellings as well as McCrary Ballpark in the vicinity. I've highlighted the size of the structure and what's proposed. This is classified as intended to be a business services type of use, so there's not commercial retail activity proposed. This is solely for business-related office services from this location. As you know, the process when we have a conditional zoning application does allow a tailored zoning district specific to the project, so there can be some deviations requested. There are a few minor deviations as we view it on this application. The first we've talked about pretty extensively. There's a request to utilize off-site landscaping to provide the buffering, hence the condition that was proposed. The secondary deviation is that it's just slightly shy of what we would typically seek in the way of off-street parking. Typically, a business services use has 3.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of office space required. This plan shows 3 spaces that are proposed. But in our view, as you consider the amount of additional concrete and smooth surface that leads into the garage doors on the property, we do think that there is availability should additional parking need to be provided. Last thing we'll note is the street yard, the dimension of that street yard along Southway Road is a little bit less in width than we would typically require. But as I said, the amount of plantings that are going within that street yard are essentially doubled from what we would typically require. So there's some trade-off being proposed there for the street yard. 7 covers the proposal pertaining to how the property to the east is proposed to be landscaped. Number 8 identifies from the city zoning ordinance what an office and institutional district, which is what's proposed, is intended to accomplish. This is a plan from the land development plan that shows, you can see McCrary Park. This subject parcel is one of those lots just due south. Again, the city's long-term plans for this general area is continued status quo residential development, but it does consider what's happening at McCrary Park as a public park activity, and I do think that has some bearings on what will happen immediately around the ballpark. So while this is a non-residential request, the city's land development plan does recommend continued neighborhood residential on the property. It's also within a primary growth area. In terms of goals and policies, not surprising, there's going to be a couple that are more negative towards this request, largely because the map at that time did not contemplate non-residential growth around McCrary Park, but there has been obviously investment made to McCrary Park that it's not necessarily anticipated at 2015 when we adopted the last land development plan. Overall, we do believe there's more goals that tend to support this than not. Again, there are a series of conditions that we've worked with the applicant to include should this application be improved. Again, they're intended to ensure that we have continued zoning compliance as well as consistency with the city's land development plan. So they cover outdoor storage prohibition, for instance, and a series of other conditions, one pertaining to permitting, any state-level permitting required for the project. So as we look at a recommendation, we note that the property's designated for residential use, but when we view this location in context with what's happening at McCrary Park, we think an appropriately controlled office district such as this can provide a transition between that sporting complex and the lower intensity residential development adjacent to the park. I'm not sure the staff would have supported a general, non-conditioned office and institutional application, but that's the reason that the applicant chose to present details of what they intend to construct here. With all that said, our recommendation is to approve this application. Likewise, the planning board gives us a favorable recommendation as well. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Comment. One thing that, a particular feature I see in this proposal that I really like that is the flat roof for the 2,400 square foot area and how that enhances the lack of visual impact to the area as opposed to a tall pitched roof. I feel like that goes a long way towards having that building blend in.
Yeah. And thank you for pointing that out. I neglected to talk about the building elevation. That is by design.
That was an interesting concept. I appreciate that effort.
Yep, that was conversations with the applicant, and ultimately they made the choice to go with a single-story pitched roof structure, in some ways to mimic a residential structure, but to have elements that help it to blend in. It is a masonry, it's a brick elevation on the street frontage side, and then vinyl or shake siding around.
It's got a natural default there for the screening for the HVAC.
Correct, right.
That creative. I like that. I appreciate it.
Rooftop mechanical equipment should be out of sight. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, anyone in the audience that would like to address council regarding this request?
Still signing in. Good evening. I'm Ronnie Pugh. Trevor covered most of the details. I will add, for those that maybe not familiar with the area, that berm that we were talking about on the west and south side, I think a conservative 8 feet berm, maybe taller. And as you can see it in the picture, it was quite considerably above the automobile that was sitting there. So we are talking about a pretty significant landscaping structure there. First of all, it was never our intent to become landlords. We purchased this lot and house primarily as a best solution for a worsening situation that was occurring at the park. And several of the city officials were aware of it, but had a situation where high school players, Legion players, and even children were being threatened about getting into the yard. And, part of the ballpark, and little kids, hard to control them chasing foul balls. So, we had a lot of discussions, had a lot of porch talks out there, but it ended up being a good win-win situation for every party, and took a lot of pressure off the former owner, and I think they're probably much happier today than they were a few years ago. But we are planning a small office and storage facility as described. And our goal here was always to do something that would complement both the neighborhood and McCrary Park. Our intentions are going in is to match the materials currently being used at McCrary Park on the restrooms and the other buildings there, so they'll tie in together as best possible. We also intend to add a porch look to the front of the building versus an office flat front, and hopefully that would do the same thing as the flat roof on the back side of, as far as better fitting into the neighborhood. We think, and had several discussions with staff, and they were a huge help to us, but it really is going to be a natural transition facility between residential and the ongoing improvements of McCrary Park, and where we intend to be there in the next couple of years. We currently have one employee and one part-time intern that would be working out of that facility, so it's not going to be a traffic thing. Matter of fact, it might cut down traffic a lot. It seems like during the season we make 12 trips a day to the park. So now we would be there if we're able to put this together. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I don't want to extend your night any more than we have to.
Right, were the staff conditions that are proposed amenable to you as a
Yes, yes.
Any other questions, Mr. Pugh? Thanks, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
And as someone that was aware of the liability that we had with that former owner, we appreciate you stepping up and buying that property, just to solve a potential problem. So thank you. Council, what are your thoughts?
Mayor, based on the consistency statement provided by staff, that it is generally within the transition between the current use of the park and the neighborhood residential, I move that we approve the conditional rezoning with the proposed conditions as suggested by staff and amenable to the applicant.
Have a motion by Mr. Bell. May I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Burks is the second. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Pugh.
Truly appreciate the effort. Thank you.
Go Keepers.
Okay, item 6C, request to designate the Park Hosier Mill and McCrary Hosier Mill located at 170 North Church Street in the former Acme McCrary Sapona Recreation Center as local historic landmarks.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a legislative hearing to consider designation of two properties as local landmarks. I'm going to turn it over to Ross Holt, who's much more qualified than me to talk about these properties and the process used to evaluate them. I'll let him give the report on the application. I will note that the former Acme McCrary building that the city purchased in December of last year is not being requested for designation at this time. That's due to us evaluating the best way to proceed with redevelopment of that and facilitating redevelopment of that property. I do think that at some point, it's likely that that property will be evaluated by the city. It was reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission as part of its review of the two properties you're going to hear about this evening. So I'll ask Mr. Holt to step forward and present the report.
Thank you, Trevor. And thank you, council members. In light of I understand there's some athletic competitions tonight. I will not read the whole landmark designation report. Heather Fernbach adapted that from her National Register application that she did for the McCrarys about 10 years ago. And
She did that for me.
she did, oh, for you, okay. Sorry.
I put the whole McCrary property on the National
National
Register
Register.
myself. I paid for that.
Thank you.
I just felt like that was
I
important.
understood. Yeah, no, that's great to know.
I paid for it, I thought it too.
But, you know, we have to send these reports off to the State Historic Preservation Office. They have a 30-day comment period, and I believe this is the only one I've ever gotten back. I've been on the Landmark Commission 7 years that didn't have red all over it, and they just said exemplary. So she knows what she's doing. So,
It was fascinating reading,
yes.
truly.
So I do bring to you tonight a recommendation from the Randolph County Historic Landmark Preservation Commission to designate the Acme McCrary Hosiery Mill Complex as a local historic landmark. And as Trevor said, our recommendation does include all three parts of the complex. You'll only be talking about the two tonight. And as the site does encompass the three elements: the original 1909 Acme McCrary Mill at 159 North Street, and additions extending south along North Street, the Parks Hosiery Mill and Acme McCrary, well, the Parks Hosiery Mill and McCrary Hosiery Mill number 2 at 170 North Church Street, now the Church Street Loft Apartments just north of us, and the Acme McCrary and Sapona Recreation Center at 148 North Street, now the Asheboro Recreation. Let me quickly refresh you about the workings of the Landmark Commission. The commission was established in 2008 by the Randolph County Board of Commissioners to recognize and preserve the county's historic sites. By intergovernmental agreements, the commission also serves as the landmark commissions for the various municipalities. When we recommend a site for designation, it goes before the governing board of the jurisdiction in which the site is located for designation by ordinance. You're seeing the landmarks that you have designated in the city. Once a landmark is designated, significant changes to the exterior have to be cleared by the Landmark Commission. I won't go into great detail about the McCrary recommendations. You have the exhaustive report by Heather. And of course, we all know the impact of Acme McCrary on Asheboro and Randolph County and beyond as our most important single industry of the 20th century, our industrial operation of the 20th century, and as a world leader in women's hosiery. We're all aware of the impact of the business, the Acme McCrary and Sapona Foundation, and the McCrary family on life in Asheboro, from the hospital to the library and other aspects of civic life. Both D.B. McCrary and his son Frank served as mayors of Asheboro. The Acme McCrary Gym was legendary in the community in the middle years of the 20th century, and also in its scope of offerings unique to Asheboro. And of course, just the name Acme McCrary was synonymous with a way of life in mid-20th century Asheboro. The McCrary Complex meets criteria for landmark designation in the landmark ordinance. It's a critical part of Asheboro's and Randolph County's heritage. It is identified with persons who significantly contributed to the architectural, cultural, economic, historical, and social development of Asheboro and Randolph County. It comprises important architecture, and it has a distinctive theme representing architectural, cultural, economic, historical, or other theme expressed through distinctive buildings. So, like I say, our recommendation encompasses all three buildings in the complex, but tonight you'll be considering only the two, the McCrary Mill number 2, Parks Hosiery Mill, and the Rec Center. And as Trevor said, city staff are looking at a path forward on the main factory on North Street. The ordinance in your packet designates the exterior of the two buildings as local historic landmarks. There are architectural elements of the interior that are very important to preserve, but our recommendations normally deal with only the exteriors. So I'll hit some high points about each building and turn it over to you. The Parks Hosiery Mill was built around 1925 by Hugh Parks, and this is viewed from sort of the southwest. And that building facing you is the Parks part. The north part is the McCrary part. It was built around 1925 by Hugh Parks, who formerly had been associated with the Randolph Manufacturing Company in Franklinville. It was bought by McCrary in 1931. In 1937, McCrary Hosiery Mill No. 2 was built adjoining. The 1937 building was designed in the Art Deco tradition by the firm of Richard H. Biberstein, an important mill architect in the southeastern region who also had a hand in expansion of the Acme building along North Street. Heather's report covers the unique interior and exterior architectural elements of both the Parks and the McCrary buildings, and how the Church Street Loft Apartments Group is rehabilitating them in compliance with the Secretary of the Interior Standard for Historic Buildings. So the long-anticipated replacement windows will bring the building back to its original appearance. The Recreation Center was designed by another prominent architect, Eric Flanagan, in the Art Moderne style and built from 1948 to 49. Flanagan, who is headquartered in Henderson, North Carolina, also designed Randolph Hospital and Asheboro High School, as is evident by the abundant yellow brick. But the hospital and the high school have been heavily modified, so the Rec Center is Asheboro's best example of his work. Charles McCrary Sr., the son of Acme McCrary founder D.B. McCrary, wanted to offer recreational facilities for mill employees and took advantage of a federal program available to companies that wanted to do that. As I noted earlier, the Rec Center became iconic in Asheboro as the Acme McCrary Gym. It had the 1,200-seat gymnasium with collapsible wood bleachers and a stage, an indoor heated swimming pool, bowling alley, soda fountain with a jukebox and a full-service cafeteria, a meeting space, a reading room, and staff offices. The top floor included a lounge with a television set where people could go to watch sporting events, World Series, because there weren't many televisions in homes at that time. Also on the top floor were 2 apartments, often shared by players on McCrary Textile League teams. A recreational facility of this level was very unusual in communities like Asheboro. So that's a recap of the wealth of information in the report. So the Landmark Commission recommends that you designate as local historic landmarks McCrary Mill No. 2, Parks Hosiery Mill, and the Acme McCrary and Sapona Recreation Center. And I will turn them over to you for your consideration and be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Question?
Thank you.
Thank you. Need a motion? Do we need a motion?
Mayor, I move we have
Hearing.
Mr. Mayor, if we would allow public comment on this.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address council regarding this proposal? Hearing none, I'll ask council their thoughts.
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve this ordinance designating the exterior of the Parks Hosiery Mill, McCrary Hosiery Mill No. 2, circa 1925, and Acme McCrary and Sapona Recreation Center, circa 1949, as local historic landmarks in Asheboro, North Carolina.
Have a motion. May I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Burks. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I really didn't know, so that's.
The straight story is when I bought my building from Acme, I had contacted Heather, contracted with her to do my application. She came to me and said, we can do your building, but it would be better if we could do the whole Acme footprint. So I said, sure, if Acme's okay, and so we met with their executive board, and she convinced them there was no downside to adding that to the National Register. So she did my application, which included the senior center, all of the whole Acme footprint downtown, including my building, which was originally a livery stable.
Thank you. That got us to this. So.
All right. Mr. Null, number 7. Follow-up regarding case RZ 22-06 related to dedication of Parkway South Townhomes, private streets to public. Do we need to even unfold these? Do we even need to unfold?
Yeah, just a little bit.
I just wanna see what the names were. I thought one of them, that I heard it was Easy Street. They had a Dickens of time.
Thank you, Mayor. In July of last year, the Parkway South Homeowners Association presented a conditional zoning district application seeking to modify the prior development approval from the city for that community. The purpose of that amendment or new conditional zoning district was to transfer street maintenance responsibility from the Owners Association to the city. Following that public hearing last July, the City Council did approve that application under several conditions. One of those pertained to recording of a new survey identifying the roads and right-of-ways that are to become city-maintained. The applicant has submitted this required survey. That is what I've presented to you here this evening, and we have reviewed it and find it to be consistent with the council's approval last year. We therefore wanted to update you on the status of that. I'll note that the public roads are to be named Parkway South Street and Easy Street, and the area of public right-of-way to be city-maintained falls between the existing curbs of those streets. It's important to note that this action will result in the readdressing of all of the residential properties within the development. We've been communicating that since the beginning of this conversation, and I know the Owners Association is aware that property owners will be receiving readdressing letters from the city to now assign addresses based on the new public streets. There is no formal action necessary from the council this meeting. We did want to present this as an update. I'll try to answer any questions if there are any. If there is no objection, however, the city attorney will prepare a resolution that the council would separately consider at a future meeting that authorize public maintenance of the streets. That'll be that action of the council considering and adopting that resolution will be the action for the city to take over maintenance responsibilities of the street. So this is more of an update to answer any questions that you may have. If there are none, you will see a resolution. It may be at the next meeting that will take the action to do this.
Thank you. Questions? Hearing none, thank you. We've been at this about a year. I think we're good.
Say, assuming there is no objection, then that'll just be on your consent agenda at the
All right.
next meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Ogburn, you want to talk about
Mayor.
zoo-themed art?
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, as part of our placemaking project, we'll be installing, city crews will be installing some zoo-themed art downtown. That's just an example of what one will look like. There's another one that will be around downtown. And then these are actually, kind of have to look at to your left. You see it's curved. Those are actually like entrance gates. And those will be at the two brick planters on the Worth Street side of the library. So they'll form that gate. So that goes with our placemaking and the downtown art we've had down there. It's been there a long time.
And these are on loan from the zoo?
These are on loan from the zoo.
Private collection of the zoo.
I'll just let you know that, Mr. Mayor, and,
The dumpster in the background is not part of it.
no.
And how
Okay.
quickly will this happen, John?
We'll get them up this spring.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ogburn.
Mayor, on item 9, Chief Building Inspector, Mr. Eddie Garner is sick, and we'll present that at a later time.
Yep.
To comply with the code.
All right, and so we'll move on to item 10. Code Enforcement Officer Chuck Garner, you have your annual report.
Well, good evening. I'd like to say thank you first for giving me the chance to come and talk, but more than that, I say thank you for the support, because without the tremendous support I get from you guys, this would be an uphill climb all the time. I will get started, I'll go through a few slides, and then if there are any questions, I'll answer the questions. On record this year, there were 2 unlawful tent cities that were cleared and cleaned up by city staff. There were 7 dilapidated structures removed and 299 notices of violation issued. And every year, I sound like a broken record when I say this, but that 299 is not a good representation of the number of items that are dealt with throughout the year. A vast majority, a bigger number than that, is dealt with in conversation and education and with cooperative property owners, businesses, and that sort of thing, and so it doesn't rise to that level. So it's not necessary to start the adversarial process with it. An example would be the gentleman that you and I spoke about, and he was very cooperative. It was just getting the right resources together in the right situation to make a better situation. So, now I could stop with this one. The previous 2 years that I've stood here, you guys have asked me about this house.
You didn't need that track hoe.
No, he was told to hurry when he was called.
Good size window fan.
And that's an example of due process, and it's frustrating sometimes, and we're all familiar with it. But it moves at that speed. It frustrates me. It frustrated most of the city, I think, especially in this case. But
Powell's happy if nobody else.
Yeah.
well, he's not the only one. It made me look like I wasn't doing my job. But the fact is that due process is very necessary. It keeps us from making mistakes. And so I'm a fan and not a fan, if that makes sense. Just another one, just for good measure, and of course I had to get the truck in there just for some good PR. This is another example of a dilapidated structure that we removed. And this is not an example of a structure that was removed, but it is an example of a property that was addressed. There's obvious problems, a junk vehicle. I'm happy to say that's all been taken care of. And it was actually dealt with without an issuance of a notice of violation. It was all through conversation and getting the right resources in the right place. This, I put this in here, it doesn't look very dramatic. And who doesn't love tearing down a house? This is no comparison as far as a picture goes. But you see the tree on the roof, and that is the resulting problem from the tree on the roof. And it's kind of a part of my job that's the real part of my job. I love this part of it. A young lady lives in this apartment. She spends 5 months battling her landlord back and forth, emails, letters, that sort of thing. She didn't know we had code enforcement. She didn't know what was available to her. She finally made her way to me. And with one phone call to landlord, and it's kind of like the tire thing. When you get the weight of the city behind it, it's addressed immediately. She dealt with it for 5 months and had nowhere to go, and then just one phone call, and it's back on track.
It's unfathomable how something like that can go on.
I don't understand it, but I see it. When we were talking earlier about the affordable housing, I was thinking to myself, I'm probably as good to talk about that as anybody, because the people we have here in town that operate those, they are the best, most responsive, never any real need for any kind of adversarial conversation. It's just a phone call, and they just are all over it. So I can't speak well enough for the ones that we currently have, on that, in that respect. But this is like the bread and butter. Nobody sees it. It's not the glamour shot, that you've got big equipment and dust clouds and that kind of thing going on, but it's the day-to-day stuff. And it's all important to me. And I don't want to say that one part's more important than the other, but I think this means the most to me, to be able to provide that service to somebody who had no idea where to
Did you ever
go.
find out why he had fixed it? Just the landlord had fixed it?
I try not to ask a lot of questions.
Money out of his pocket.
That's what it amounts to. And they have, and in some cases, they have a tenant who probably can't afford to go somewhere else, you know, and live because the rent is, you know, inexpensive. So, but it doesn't matter because, you know, whether it's 600 or 1,600 a month, the same codes apply to the properties, you know, and the same standards are there. So I got through it quick. Any questions?
How many houses have we torn down in the last 10 years, roughly?
Yeah, because it goes beyond just
Talking
houses.
about structures.
Structures, dilapidated structures that we tore down.
I would say, yeah, well over 130.
Well, that's a significant number.
Yeah.
People talk to me all the time, well, you know, there's a house here, why don't y'all do something about this house? Well, you just explained, some of them are voluntary, just explaining, you know, having a
Consensual,
conversation.
right.
Others make us go through the legal process.
Yeah.
And the yellow house, we all took heat for the yellow house
Yeah.
for a couple of years.
Right.
But it was the process.
And I really expected to come in one day and that house be down. Just, I mean, you know, just from gravity as much as anything else.
I ride by it quite often, and I thought a couple times about getting out and see if I couldn't blow it down.
Well, there's,
Kick that one for.
there have been a lot of suggestions made.
But
I'll say that.
it's significant, and Larry, I think it's important that the public know that we have, on our own, demolished around 130 dilapidated structures in the last 10 years. And part of that is our code doesn't allow it, doesn't allow those things to exist. But even without the code, I wouldn't want it next to my house. Nobody in this town should have to live with a house like that next to their house.
Yeah.
So when we're aware of it, we sick Chuck on them, and Chuck is very successful. You're great.
Thank
I
you.
depend on you a lot, and I
Yeah.
handed you one today.
Well, yeah, and I'll go tomorrow. And in response to that, when I get, it's unusual, Monday I had 44 voicemails. It was a busy weekend. And that is really unusual. Usually there's a pretty high number, but not that. So it's been a busy time, but we're coming into spring and everybody's out and they're looking around. So the phone rings a lot more. And when I take all those really serious, but you said something earlier and when we were talking, and when people call me, that's serious. It needs to be looked at. It needs to be addressed. They need to be served by the city that they live in. When one of you guys call me, I look at it as somebody has contacted you, and you are, that's as high up the food chain as they can go. They've done everything they can in this. So that's one of that makes my approach maybe even faster, because I want them to feel like I went as far as I could go. Let's see what the city does now. And there's not always a case to be made. I mean, it could be nothing, but oftentimes there.
What's your situation, where you stand with the 2 tents over on Albemarle Road?
We'll be gone tomorrow. I was there today.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I'll be gone tomorrow.
I had another call about that today.
Yeah,
I knew you were working on it.
yeah.
And
They
in most
actually-
cases, I will tell you, most cases, when somebody calls me about one, I know Chuck's already working on it. I called Chuck and he said, oh yeah, that house belongs to so-and-so, and I've talked to them, you know.
Yeah. That's, we're a small enough city to be able to do that, but we still offer big city benefits, you know, so that's kind of the best of both, really, I think.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a good night.
Okay, Captain Hill, you got a solution for us? You brought your wildlife guy with you. Surely there's a solution.
I brought the heavy hitter. Well, I did. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd like to, on behalf of Chief Lineberry, thank you for the opportunity to address this important issue. I know when I watch YouTube on here, it's kind of hard to hear, so I'll try to be loud, because in case my chief is listening, which he is, you want to hear what I got to say. So, yeah, I brought in a heavy hitter. It's like work smart, not hard. And this is Officer Darrell Johnson with North Carolina Wildlife. And so, you know, some of these things we want to talk about before I go off too far in these weeds. I want to say to the wildlife officers, you know, Officer Johnson and Sergeant Mike King, and I don't know if y'all are familiar with Mike King, but well, I know like Clark is. We have active shooter training every year, also called rapid deployment. And this year, 2022, they were such a huge help for us. They were able to come, be personnel to go through the training. They said, we want to be there too. Whatever y'all have in your city, we want to be there to assist as well if it comes. And that's what we do. We work with other public service agencies. I know Officer Johnson was there. Sergeant Mike King, he's been helping us out with training. He brought some equipment that was helpful. And so I just want to kind of give him a shout out for that. I really appreciate that. And again, I appreciate you being here tonight. So some of the stuff we're going to talk about is, actually, I don't want to bore you to death, even though I already got all the deer people out of here. You know, some of the things we can talk about is natural, organic things and ways that these folks in this neighborhood who are dealing with this deer problem can you know, mitigate this problem. You know, I'm not going to read this whole list, but I can tell you that, you know, they say everything from planting flowers that they don't like and something to deter them, like maybe flowers that are prickly or hairy or something like that. You know, and don't intentionally feed the deer. You know, I looked it up and I spoke with our animal control officers. There's no ordinance about feeding deer, but our animal control had said they believe somebody on Dave's Mountain is feeding deer pretty regularly, seeing itself, and it's in the backyard and there's a bunch of deer, and I don't know. But there's no ordinance, so that's just something I brought to your attention. You know, we cannot find an ordinance on that, or even it should be an ordinance. I don't know. As far as other things they can do, scarecrows, them wind spinners, all kinds of little things like that. Nets for the trees. You've got organic at-home repellents they could put on. I mean, even Lister now, I'm not joking, string stuff along, cans, all this stuff I'm reading, things they can do.
You couldn't get a visit from Chuck, I can tell you.
Yeah, yeah, you would, you sure would. Yeah, tear your house down. But, yeah, for me, I live on 13 acres from 134, and I'm gonna tell you, I got some deer. I got some hawks too to attack my chicken. My kids and I, we built a little chicken coop, we put it on wheels, we rolled around. I try to rotate the grazing for the chickens, and man, the hawks are just tearing us up. And so I did a little research, and once I put a scarecrow and a fake owl, I promise, in the last year or so, I had not one hawk attack. So I say that and saying some of this stuff could work for deer also. But it's, you know, it could be a minimal, you know, solution. I know that where I live, obviously, in the county, I can, if I need to, I can hunt these deer, right? I can take these deer out if I need to. So that's one solution to help, you know, manage the population. Also, one thing I found very helpful that also someone in the city might not be able to do, and that's my dog, Timber. We let him out, he'll bark, he'll scent around the property, and they scent that as they think it's a predator, really, like a coyote or something. So I think that's my number one deer deterrence is my dog. Goes all around the property, and so that helps. But again, these solutions are not going to work for someone on Dave's Mountain. You know, they can't just let the dogs out and run around. They can't hunt. They can't shoot them. So one of my suggestions, one of the main things I would say coming out of this is if we could work with our community resource team, with animal control, and if wildlife, you'd be willing to come and have a meeting. Just sit down and say, you know, talk to the residents, those who are being affected by this. Sit down and just tell them, here's the solutions. If they got concerns or questions, maybe we can answer them. I don't know. I don't know if it comes to that, if you think it's a good idea, but that's just one solution. Because there's many things, again, that I think we could tell them that may be helpful. Some things they're already using. They may tell their neighbor, I do that, don't do that. It doesn't work. I don't know. But again, so much of this is minimal. There is one other thing I wanted to mention, but that's why one of the main reasons I had Darrell with me, is talking about like and I know y'all probably heard this before, it's the most controversial thing we'll talk about, hunting season, an urban archery season in the city. I know Randleman, I've been in contact with them, they've done, I think, 10 years now. It's been somewhat successful in keeping the population down, the problems. Just an idea. And is there anything you want to add on that, Officer Johnson?
Yeah, what he's talking about is urban archery season. I've talked to Clark about this quite a bit. It's a way for citizens in the city to allow hunters or themselves to take those deer out of the population. It's something you guys can look at and be as restrictive as you want to be. Like Pittsburgh has a restriction on, they have to register to stands prior to the season, tell them where it's at, give them GPS coordinates. Those folks have to give, show they're competent using their bow. Be as restricted to that or as loose as you want to be. It's just something you as a city council would have to figure out how you want to do it. Hunting is probably the most effective way to take these deer out of the population, besides a car. And cars, hunters and cars are the two biggest enemies of deer. And all these ideas that Captain Hill's brought up are good ideas, but at the end of the day, the hunter's probably the best way to control that population.
But you mentioned homeowners feeding them. Isn't that a genesis of a lot of this issue?
Yeah, I would say if that's accurate, based off what an animal control officer said to me, yes, that would be a problem. But again, I looked in as far as ordinances, I don't think there's anything to address that.
Nothing in protected species or anything in state law that prohibits. Now, they can't take a fawn and keep it, can they?
No, they cannot. Yeah, they cannot.
But they can feed all they want in their backyard.
There's nothing prohibited around here in state law that prohibit them from feeding.
I proposed an urban archery season 7, 8, 10 years ago.
Well, I haven't forgotten.
Yeah, we were looking at Sanford as it got defeated 4-3. We got a new council now. But
I think candidly, there's some concern at the time that there wasn't at least any availability to restrict it. Either you had it and it was open, or you didn't.
And you ain't got a couple of my neighbors.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, I mean, it may be something.
Maybe something we can research. We can reach out to Pittsburgh.
Just, now that you're here, is there a particular time that would be, if we were to be limited in scope in terms of, by the calendar, is there a particular?
The urban archery season is after the regular deer season, so it comes in, I want to say, mid-January, runs through February a little bit. But you would have to have all your regulation on it.
I think Franklinville has one.
Franklinville and Randall are two cities here to have one. I think by April 1st, from off the top of my head, is the date that you would have to file something with the Wildlife Commission to put the city into the urban archery season.
All right, in Randleman, do they have to check their take? Anything they take, they check it?
It's still.
So you can track the numbers?
Yes.
Is there significant decrease in the numbers based on the archery in Randleman?
I would have to look. I can tell you, just like every hunter gets 6 deer, if you buy a hunting license, you have 6 deer, 4 does, and 2 bucks to be taken out. That season, if you don't use all 6 of those up during the regular deer season, whatever you have left, you can utilize during the archery season, urban archery season. So I could get the numbers for you.
Byron, you mind making that call? I mean, call Randleman PD and see if.
Yes.
If they're tracking the numbers, because, having a season is one thing. If it's effective, that's great.
Yeah.
If you got 15 hunters and they're only taking 1 deer apiece, for their freezer or not reporting.
Yeah.
And I expect there are some that probably don't bother with reporting.
Or the ones that are outside the city claim they're in the city.
Yeah.
That happens still.
And include anything else they bag, mailman.
Yeah, I had a contact I reached out to. I didn't go into real big detail. Didn't know how far we want to go with this. But I do know that retired Captain Tim Lee got one because he brought one by the PD. He got one up in Randleman.
He lives in Randleman?
I don't know, but he was hunting.
Yeah, I think.
He does. So
okay.
You can hire somebody to hunt your property on the urban deer season. Urban.
Yeah, but can we hire somebody to hunt on your property? That gets complicated.
I think you would.
I can see Jeff rolling over now.
You'd have to look at the laws about hiring folks to come in and everything, I think so.
I I know I'm reading the city ordinance, it doesn't necessarily, it's not applicable, but if you have city property, we have stuff at the airport, at the transfer station, we go out there and, shoot wild hogs or the coyotes. And it's not a lot of city property, I reckon, up on the mountain, but, I don't know. It's just an idea, something, we're trying to give y'all as much information and ammunition to make good decisions. And
We never had deer at our house until the soccer complex, and it's not an abundance.
Displaced wildlife,
Yeah.
right? We cleared 85 acres and they had to go somewhere. They went to Walker's house.
Hey, all they doing is taking over where Joanne and I were killing the shrubs.
Well, any other questions? We appreciate your time.
Let me know.
I'll look further into it.
Thank you.
We can revisit urban archery season. Just if it's a widespread problem and we're hearing from lots and lots of people. They come through my backyard occasionally, but I don't know that, well, I can promise you, my wife's not gonna let me shoot one. Even if I did know how to use a bow and arrow, or a crossbow or whatever. Crossbow's not illegal in North Carolina anymore. Is it?
Well, I can just attest, with living in the Days Mountain area, we have counted up to 18 in our backyard at one time.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Officers go through, they say it, we
you
pass
don't
some
feed
X up in there.
Next door neighbor.
They eat all the plants I plant.
They ride around at night, they see.
Yeah, they see them at night, and, occasionally they'll go up and respond to a wreck or they've hit one. Yeah, you definitely see them. That's what I was saying about, getting together with the residents. I don't know if you have a contact. That's something they would even wanna do. It's like, I don't know how many people are concerned about this issue. I'm just saying, we would be willing to, I'm sure y'all would, just meet with them and do this, but more in depth and things you can do to keep property safe. We do this, with crime prevention. We're like, hey, lock your windows, your doors, all that stuff. Never done it about deer, but hey, it's the first time for everything.
Well, and here's the shortcoming of what you started out with.
Yeah,
We're just asking them to move to somebody else's yard.
yeah.
So predation, I guess is the correct word, taking deer like that with urban archery, decreases population, and then there'll be fewer that have to move to somebody else's yard.
I think that's the premise. You're totally right. I think that's,
And then we'd have to look at our ordinance that we have about projectiles in the city.
yeah.
Because you can't shoot, bean shooters even on there.
Yeah.
You can't even shoot a bean shooter at anything.
Just suspend it for
Sound like a
that
boon
time
for
period.
Jamie Crumley.
Yeah.
They're also got, you have to shoot from an
Elevated.
elevated position.
Yeah, certain elevation, shoot down.
Well, we can continue to study this.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks,
Yes, sir.
appreciate you being here, appreciate your work on behalf of the citizens of North Carolina.
Got a hard job.
That's a hard job. Find yourself out in the woods in the middle of the night staking out very often.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Ms. Reeves, you got 12A, ordinance to amend the general fund.
Yes, Mayor and City Council. Item 12A is ordinance to amend the general fund appropriating $300,000 from the general fund balance to be moved to the the McCrary Ballpark Fund to allocate funding for city employees to do some of their work that is scheduled out there that is outside of the contract with Rogers Builders. I recommend adoption by reference.
I have a recommendation from staff to approve by reference this amendment to the general fund for allocating additional funds for departments for use of McCrary Ballpark improvements outside of the executed contract. May I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, make a motion, approve by reference.
I have a motion by Mr. Moffett. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Heath. Questions? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 12B is ordinance to amend McCreary Ballpark Fund.
Yes, this ordinance to amend the McCrary Ballpark Fund is to recognize the transfer of $300,000 from the general fund and to set up funding in the miscellaneous category in the expenditure budget for the project. So they have some place to charge their charges. Recommend adoption by reference.
Have a recommendation to approve by reference. May I have a motion?
Mayor, I move we approve the ordinance to amend the McCrary Ballpark Improvements Fund by reference.
I have a motion by Mr. Bell. May I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Burks. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Item 12C is ordinance to amend the general fund, allocating funds to Airport Improvement Fund 2.
Yes, as you heard, is one of the recommendations of the audit is that there are some timing issues when you have federal projects between the expenditure in the project fund and the revenue that's generated, in which we were recognized or cited for having a negative fund balance as a result of this. We have mitigated this issue in the Airport Improvements Fund 66, the original one, by doing a transfer from the general fund of temporary funds there to provide additional revenue to cover those periods of time. I recommend adopting that same philosophy for this second Airport Improvement Funds. Recommended amount as a transfer is $350,000, which is the same amount that we have in the other Airport Improvements Fund project. It seems to have covered the level of expenditure that goes through there, and it will keep us from being cited for timing issues that we have no control over. I recommend adoption by reference.
You expect to get that back from the feds?
It will. It's basically a timing mechanism. We really don't plan on spending it. It's just on paper as a revenue that will show there. Everything that we spend in the airport projects is reimbursed because it's grant-oriented. It's just there's a timing issue of when we get the money. You have to spend the money, recognize the expense in the project, then request the funding from the federal government to be sent back. And during the middle of the year, it's not an issue, but when you're closing fiscal periods, it becomes an issue.
So it's a place to park.
Pardon me?
It's a place to park fund balance in the
Yes.
airport fund, but not actually use it except for.
That is the philosophy, yes.
Do I have a motion to approve by reference?
I'll make that, go ahead.
I have a motion by Ms. Heath. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second, Mr. Bell. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Item 12, E, ordinance to amend and close the sidewalk improvement fund.
Actually, we're doing 12D, which is an ordinance to amend the Airport Improvement Fund,
Oh,
which is recognizing the receipt of those funds from the general
Skip C.
fund in the
Skip
project.
D.
12D. We just did 12C, which is the
Okay,
ordinance to
D.
amend the general fund. Now we're gonna
They
do,
look the same to me, I'm sorry.
they do. These first six of them look very similar.
Do I have a motion to approve, item D
Mayor,
to
I move-
coincide with item C?
Mayor, I move we approve by reference.
I have a motion by Mr. Burke. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Ms. Redding? Thank you. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Item D is approved. Item E, to amend and close the sidewalk improvement fund.
Yes, if you recall, this is a project that has gone on for a long time. Trevor has presented to council several times on this issue. We got a grant for some sidewalk improvements over in the RCC area. RCC gave us some funds relating to that. The cost to actually do the project by contracted services was greater than the amount of the grant, so the city opted to use their internal forces in order to complete the sidewalk work. That work has been completed. There is no need to keep this project fund open, so I'm recommending closing the fund and moving any excess funds that are in that project at this time back to the general fund. I recommend adoption by reference.
Have a motion, have a recommendation. May I have a motion?
Mayor, I'll move that we approve this ordinance to amend and close the sidewalk improvements fund.
Have a motion by Ms. Heath. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Swears. On item E, discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries on item E. F, ordinance to amend the general fund and receive funds from sidewalk improvement fund.
Just like the other ones, item B and item D, we have to do a countering ordinance to recommend the receipt of the funds from the sidewalk improvement fund into the general fund. I recommend adoption by reference.
Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I move we adopt by reference.
Motion by Mr. Burks on item F. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Heath. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries on item F. Item G, ordinances to amend the general fund, subsection I for cultural and recreational division. Go ahead, Ms. Reeves.
Yes, I am, this ordinance appropriates $431,000 from the general fund to be transferred to both the 615, which is the Sunset Theater, Cultural Services Department budget, and to 620, which is the Recreation Department budget. The changes are recommended to account for programmings at Sunset Theater. It also is appropriated to offset some changes in funding that we've given to external agencies for youth activities and athletics, increase utilities costs, and salary and benefits adjustments in the Recreation Department. If you recall, the Recreation Office has been, services in that area have been very low in compared to some others just because of COVID. They haven't been able to do things. And we project the best as possible with regard to anticipated needs. But as we open up, we learn that there's more staffing that's needed than we initially anticipated at the budget. We didn't anticipate rate increases that would impact our utilities at the level they are. And we've had a great opportunity to develop some other programs or allow from other programs to be at our different facilities. So I recommend adoption by reference for these changes in the Recreation and Cultural Service Division expenses to give them some operating funds to finish out the rest of the year. I recommend adoption by reference.
Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I move we approve or adopt the ordinance to amend the general fund by reference.
I have a motion by Mr. Bell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Burks. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And last, amend the general fund for City Hall parking lot.
Yes, sir. As everybody knows, City Hall parking lot has been destroyed to prepare for new parking for the Church Street lofts. I talked with Superintendent of the Street Department, Barry Hamilton, and he recommends the cost for his department, some of which will be internally handled and some will be externally handled, will be about $225,000. I was not aware of that we were going to be doing this at the time we presented the budget. Therefore, I need to request appropriation to pay for these expenditures so that we can clean up and finish the project at City Hall parking. I recommend adoption by reference.
Questions?
What was the amount, Debbie?
$225,000 is what he's estimating his cost to be.
That's Barnyard's asphalt.
Okay,
Look at me, that stuff costs money.
do I have a motion?
You make it with petroleum, it costs money.
Mayor, I move we approve request by reference.
Motion by Mr. Bell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Swears. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, can I go back to utilities for a minute. I wanted to ask about the skate park. I drive by there and I see these huge lights on, and there's not a soul there using it. I mean, how much is the skate park in use? I mean, enough for all those utilities, what, 13,000 or 1,300 something utilities for it? I just wondered about that.
It's not used a lot. However, it was built for a purpose.
Yeah, I would have voted for it because
It was
at that
built.
time, we had people skating on everything around.
That was it. We couldn't run them off of the steps at PNC or the steps at the gym or City Hall or anywhere else because their response was nowhere else to skate. So we built this with a grant, with Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant. I have noticed on bad weather days, what people don't realize when they ride by is that there are skate ramps indoors with heaters.
Okay.
And occasionally there'll be one or two people or three people after school and they're skating, primarily the younger kids because the older kids don't want to wear helmets and knee pads
Yeah, I
and
knew
all
that was a
that.
problem, yeah.
But there are sometimes during inclement weather, kids inside that you can't see because there are ramps and heat inside. Jonathan, you want to address his question about,
Why the lights are on?
well, about the use?
Well, can I offer one thought of clarification?
Yeah.
The $13,000 that you reference
Yeah.
is actually utility lights at McCrary Gym. The skate park is
It
$1,000.
said skate park or something on there, I thought.
Yeah, the one right above that is $1,000 reference for the skate park. It's
Okay.
just, it's
I'm
very
sorry,
hard to
okay.
follow the lines when you
Okay.
have so many numbers, but I just want to clarify for discussion
good,
that
yeah, yeah.
I'm only asking 1,000 for the skate park and 13,000 for Acme McCrary Gymnasium.
Okay, I misread that, I'm
But-
sorry.
All right.
but, Jonathan, you may want to address why the lights are on at night when the park's open. That's-
Yes, our hours go till 7 o'clock at night, and the lights are actually on to attract people to come. If the lights weren't on, people would think that it's closed.
Okay. You don't have any figures, how many people are using it at night or anything? Like I said, when I go by there, I've seen nobody there, and those lights are just those huge lights, and I wonder about, are we wasting money here about that? But anyway,
We're not necessarily wasting money, but the facility was built with the grant, which the grant stipulates it has to be used for that purpose for 25 years
Okay.
from onset, or you have to refund the grant.
Keep
So
that
it's
open.
sort of in a catch-22.
yeah, that's a good catch-22 right there.
I'm sorry,
And-
Captain Hill, what'd you say?
That's how skateboards are homeless.
Pass out skateboards to homeless folks and that gives them something to do. Instead of, having nothing to do.
I like that idea.
25 years, we made it homeless shelter. All right, okay, item 13. We have, and I will address this, it's really not on the, not much of a discussion plan for tonight, but, wanted to lay the groundwork. We have had some requests for, wine and beer sales at Sunset Theater. We had accommodated that as a through private rentals, I believe, early on. Is that right? That was,
Basically through nonprofit fundraising.
okay, nonprofit fundraiser. We are getting some requests, and so what I wanted to, the reason it's on the agenda, what I'd like to do is with the concurrence of the council, ask staff to investigate what other theaters, specifically ones that come to mind are the Paramount in Burlington and the Carolina in Greensboro and any other theaters in
Temple and Sanford.
and Temple and Sanford,
That's a good.
theaters that might meet our similar demographics and function. Look and see what they're doing and what their policies are related to what they're doing. And brainstorm possibly any other alternatives. I know at the Temple, the little wine shop next door, for years, the wine shop was, you know,
The supplier.
the supplier. You'd leave during intermission, go next door. And this may be as simple as with our social district, allowing people to walk in with a drink they bought somewhere else. So I'd like for, staff, our professional staff to, if this is all right with council, come back in a month or two with some ideas on what others are doing and possible solutions to, the questions we're getting. Doesn't mean we are or are not gonna open it to alcohol sales, but we need to at least investigate. And, how does council feel about that? Asking.
You shall receive.
I think the survey and the information will be of great value. And I think Salisbury and Concord both have some interesting places as well that would be comparable, like music and show venues.
Yeah.
I think my first blush is that, you bring up an interesting point. Sometimes, I won't go as far as say unintended consequences, but something I haven't really thought about was the social district effect upon this matter. I think if we're gonna venture down this investigative path, my initial take is we need to have full and total control. And I think that would be through the dispensing of itself and our own bartenders to monitor the, patrons.
Right now, it's a blank slate.
You know, so I mean, I think if you're gonna go down that, I think you can go down the whole path, and, I think the social district method, that could have some unintended consequences.
We also need to have an adequate place in the building if we're gonna get into business.
Yeah, well, and I think it's inevitable that we end up in this business. I mean, if we move along with our tourism recreation, this is,
So, John,
good
can
opportunity
you
to look at it.
direct that?
We'll do a study and give the council, all, what other people are doing and what our alternatives are.
Any suggestions as far as what we can do, or what we might consider doing?
Or what we shouldn't do.
Or what, or
I don't think, we don't have to be Lewis and Clark. Let's get the study and see what's working and not working elsewhere.
Yeah.
all right, moving on. Everybody else okay with that?
Yes.
All right. Upcoming events, tomorrow night, Stephanie Quayle at the Sunset Theater. And she's gonna be performing her new album, and it has to do with some tragedy in her life, and
Know the story is pretty amazing.
be interesting.
Mayor, that's free, and the next night in Summerfield, it costs $38.
All right. 7:30 tomorrow night, free.
Yeah, I caught them.
Or you can skip the free and go to Summerfield for 30
Visit David Cass.
and rent a room at the inn at Summerfield. All right, St. Patrick's Day, Irish Moon St. Patrick's Day concert, March 17th at 7 p.m. Is that at the theater? Okay, that is at the theater. It says right there, Sunset Theater Events. And 101 Dalmatians, the movie, on March 16th through the 19th. Tickets, $10. Whoa.
That's actually a play production.
Oh, that is not the movie, that's the youth theater. Okay,
Cruella.
that'd be cool. I went to the last, youth theater production at the Sunset Theater, and it was well done,
They're good.
entertaining. All right, daylight savings time Sunday morning, 18th St. Patrick's Day celebration in Bicentennial Park. Kiwanis Pancake Day, if I get my job done. I'm not ready yet, but that's Tuesday, March 21st, and then the 25th, 11 a.m. ribbon cutting at Worthville Road, boat access, the wildlife access, and Randleman on the Blue Way, the Deep River Blue Way. And then on Monday, March 27th, Department of Labor Safety Awards at AVS. And then I have a meeting with the senator in the morning at 11.
At 11.
All right. Anybody else got anything for the calendar?
I've got one thing for the calendar, another year of the trail event, which the Worthville Road Boat Access is also a year of the trail event. But this weekend, Sunday, March 12th, Healthy Communities will be doing a hike from Mundo Vista at Camp Caraway to Slip Rock Mountain. So that's the usual meet at the farmer's market at 1:30, or you can meet at the location.
And that's a strenuous 3-mile hike because it's up and down on loose rock. All right, anything else? Anybody have any other items for the calendar?
Mayor, invite everybody to come down Saturday, March the 18th for the downtown, for the St. Patrick's celebration and to celebrate my birthday.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then I want everybody to come to the Kiwanis Club Pancake birthday
For
and get
Clark's
Clark's birthday.
You got ahead of me here. John Ogbur's birthday is on the 18th and Clark Bell's birthday is on the 21st. The,
And Joanne Moffitt's birthday's today.
Today, yeah.
oh,
Don't you forget, Walker.
You can imagine the accolades I'm getting from my public service. We had pecan pie with candles numbering something.
all right. Saturday,
That's
this
for
Saturday at 9:30 is the human race at Bicentennial Park.
Is this Saturday?
18th, next Saturday.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry, I did say this Saturday. Next Saturday. This,
Freaking out there for a minute.
this Saturday, it's Greater St. John Church.
Yeah.
Where I gotta be at 11 o'clock.
It's freaking me out.
All right. Kelly, anything?
Yes, just a couple things. I just want to thank John and all the city staff for all the work that you did for our retreat. It was incredibly beneficial, and I know putting together those presentations takes a lot of time, so thank you very much for that. And then also, too, just to share some news from Downtown Asheboro, Inc., the Shriners are going to be coming to town for their district meeting August 23rd through the 27th, and this district is from Mount Airy to Southern Pines, and we expect anywhere from 400 to 500 people to be in town for the event. Most of our activities will be Saturday the 26th at Sunset Theater and Exchange. There is going to be a parade. Yes, we understand they're going to have little cars and all that. So that afternoon, it looks like they're going to follow the Christmas parade route, but it's only going to last about 30 minutes. But that's super exciting to have that
It'd be a pretty
event
cool little
here.
parade.
So just wanted to share that.
They're gonna bring their parade vehicle. All right, thanks, Kelly. Charles?
I'm good, thank you.
I'll give a shout out to the animal control. We've had an issue not related to deer, but other uninvited wildlife in our house. We called them, my daughters called them, and they're exceptionally happy with the response that we've gotten from animal control. They've been, and on 3 occasions to empty the traps that they've had to set and rid ourselves of vermin.
Good. That's encouraging. All of you hear about the python at the Fairfield Inn?
No.
Oh, my gosh.
Go home with you.
Oh, my God.
They found a python in an empty room. The people checked out and left a damn snake. At the Fairfield about 3 weeks ago or a month.
Is that one of the ones-
Animal control responded.
Really? Was that one of the ones that was on the zoo, the national, Nat Geo has things on zoos, and our zoo was part of that. And part of that, we had like 4 reclaimed pythons.
And one of them was like 22 foot long. They're huge.
Well, we have a resource out there at the zoo that Byron, animal control doesn't always have to handle exotic animals. And, you know, I remember the story a few years back where somebody had a pretty good sized python at North Asheboro and bit him, and he threw it in a dumpster and called the police, and the police shot the snake. Rather than call the zoo and say, you know, come up here and get this snake, our police officer just shot the snake.
Well, sometimes your first reaction is hard to overcome.
You gotta put a dumpster lid in there and you see his sod and see his python in it, you'll shoot it.
Well, not many places have experts within 5 miles, 6 miles on how to handle a big snake. All right. Walker?
I take this opportunity to read into the record that I proclaim it Joanne Moffat's birthday.
It's official now.
That's very good. Saturday, the Eastern Randolph Wildcat boys basketball team will be playing for a state championship, first time they've ever made it to the state title game. And, so that's kind of a big deal for our county I feel like we're gonna get a state title.
And they're
another one in
playing
Randolph
where?
County. They're playing at Reynolds, Coliseum at NC State. They're playing Wilson Prep, which, you know, they recruit players. So we just got some boys from Ramseur and Franklin
And,
trying to whip them.
and Eastern doesn't recruit.
Not basketball. Not basketball. I don't know how you're gonna keep your coach, your basketball coach at Ramseur. He's a tremendous young man, and what he's done.
Harlem Globetrotters?
He was a former Harlem Globetrotter and Wolfpack player. Yeah.
James?
I just second what Ms. Heath said. I really did appreciate all the work that went into the retreat and how valuable it was.
It was an excellent job.
Bill? Well, thank you, staff, newspaper, thank you so much. Appreciate your coverage. And we are adjourned.
Go Pack.